Yeah, I think we're at the top of the hour. So thanks everyone for joining Jesse's webinar series. I'm James Gibson, for those that don't know me, one of the account managers here at JASCI. We also have Joe Rist on the line. Joe, would you like to make a quick introduction?
Yep. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar series again. I'm Joe Rist. I'm the Director of Solution Sales here at JASCI. And today I'll be bringing us through a webinar on managing team members, the setup, and different screens and tools you use to, redirect work to particular team members or to set up what their authorities are, things like that. So we're very excited to show it. It's a critical first step in implementing the WMS, and then also for any time you're onboarding a new team member. So thanks for joining this webinar and all the rest of them, and excited to get started.
So Joe, I think if you want to start sharing your screen, we can go ahead.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So let me make sure I share the correct screen. All right. Cool. Can you see that?
Yep, we can see that.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get logged in. Now, when you enter your credentials, we're going to talk about how you get your credentials. But as let's say you're an administrator or you're whoever's responsible for setting up your team members when you log into the system, you're going to use a few different tools that we have built. So if I go under setup and then team member, I can see that and this is also sometimes stored under an admin menu profile, and we'll talk about menu profiles in just a moment. But you can see I have a few screens here. We have the team member maintenance, we have authority, and we have team member security authorizations. These are three specific screens that you need to go to create a team member or a user. And then for them to have particular authorities granted to them, as well as their login information. And then we also have an additional step, which is the menu profile assignment. So that fourth step, this menu profile assignment, is basically declaring which menu profiles, which if you look at the top of the screen right now, that's highlighted in that 9 dash setup, that's the profile. And then within that profile, you have particular menu options, like the one I have highlighted right now, called menu profile assignment. So that menu option is what you use to dictate who has which profiles assigned to their user. And this is for both the desktop or full screen use of JASCI as well as the mobile device. You can declare which menus the user is going to have access to on both types of devices. So let's go ahead and get started. We're also going to be talking about a part of our new AI assistant today. This new tool, the aim is to really rapidly increase the speed of onboarding team members. So we'll show that in just a moment. But first, we're going to pop into these pages that I just brought up here. The team member maintenance being the first one. Maintenance programs in JASCI are to edit or to create certain types of data, like team members or users. You can also use the cart maintenance to set up and configure your picking carts. You can use the container maintenance to establish your boxes and totes and pallet sizes and things like that. So, product maintenance would be if you need to edit any products. Typically, that's going to be done from the ERP or host system through an API, but we also have maintenance programs to really create or edit just about anything in JASCI. So let's go into our team member maintenance now. This is where we have the opportunity to search across team members. We can plug in part of their name, and we can search across a particular fulfillment center because you may have, not every team member is going to be assigned to your different fulfillment centers. Or we can hit the new button, or we have the option to display all. So if I hit display all, this is going to show all of the different team members that I have in here. These are, different employees that we've had at JASCI or partners, things like that, that I've, made in this demo environment. I've made users for them. So, we can find one in particular, like mine, and we can go in and we can hit edit. And this will allow us to edit the information that's tied to this user. We also have the add new button right here. So this is how you would add a new user, and you plug in the information like the first name, last name, address. Now, these types of information, we traditionally required it in the past. However, in that new AI tool, you're going to see a few improvements with the creation of team members. I want to show that next to show what the difference is between the original format of this member creation, which you can still use. However, we have that new AI tool that makes it much simpler. You can put in things like their system use. I'm sorry, their department, their language. That's a big one as well. So JASCI is a multi-language system. So, most of our users are operating in English. However, let's say you have some users that speak Spanish. What you would do is you would set their language to Spanish, basically have them log out, and then log back in, and the system will be in Spanish. Now, if your company, and that's just an example, we can do any of the different languages. We also have tables to further refine the translations, whether it's a certain word that couldn't translate properly, or maybe it's a certain dialect where you have a better translation for a certain word that pops up in JASCI. But it will translate all of your menus, all of the different words on the screen. Now, we do have this language swap button. If you look in the top right, you could see the current language that it's set to. So this toggle, which is on both the full screen and the mobile, will allow you to switch between languages for the user that is logged in actively, and then swapping back to the main language of the company. And this is helpful in an instance where maybe somebody on the floor that speaks Spanish and operates in the system in Spanish, maybe they need help with a certain process or finding a certain screen, and the person that's helping them does not speak Spanish. Then you can simply use this language swap to flip between the two different languages, rapidly. So anyway, I just wanted to include a little bit of information there on the language side of things. But this team member maintenance is what creates that user in the system. And once you create a user, you then would go in and set their security authorizations. So a security authorization is basically your login information. So I'll just go to one here. If we went to, we'll go to mine, for example. Um, Here it is. So if we look here and you could see the password, it's going to be encrypted, so that you can't see what they chose to put their password as. However, you can overwrite this, and when you overwrite this, what it does is it's basically like you've given them the ability to reset their password upon their next login. And this is what we do at the initial creation of users in JASCI is typically you have like an administrator who's going to be creating all of the users for the team members. And what you would do is you would give them their login information with a just generic password. And then what JASCI does is for the first time a user logs in with that initial generic password, they're immediately prompted to enter their correct pass or their intended password. And that will allow them to have control over what it's set to without having to give password info to someone in the company. But you do always have that access to this authority in the event that you would need to, do a password change without having to go through like a whole like reset email thing, which we also have as well. And you can also see security questions and answers that you plug in. So I didn't put any like real data here, but you could choose different security questions if you do want to go through like those steps to get access back to your account. Um, so one thing you'll also see up here is that it's grayed out, but it's the user ID. The user ID is what you will sign in with. And to give you a better example of that, I'll go ahead and hit the sign out button. And you can see here where it says user ID. This is going to be what you want your team members or users entering when they're signing into JASCI. Some of our customers, they like to do email addresses. Some of our customers like to do, first initial, last name, or, first name, last name, initial. Whatever you want that to be, you typically like to keep it consistent. But just keep in mind that's what the user ID means, is it's basically your login ID. It doesn't necessarily have to be identical to your team member ID or team member name, but it's just what you want to enter when you're logging in from full screen or from a mobile device. So if we go back in there, and by the way, this environment I logged into is multi-company. So I wanted to mention that on the team member maintenance as well. So we'll pop back in there for just a moment. So if we go into that team member maintenance and we scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see below the language, we also have the company selection. So I've got way too many companies in here because I've used this environment for years for doing 3PL demonstrations. But you can also select the fulfillment centers as well. So this would be for what companies and fulfillment centers you want to give them access to. Typically, for a fulfillment center, for a multi-fulfillment center, that's going to be someone that's, with the executive team or, higher up, and they need that cross fulfillment center visibility for the sake of reporting. For someone that's actually doing, day-to-day kind of work within a fulfillment center, it's not as dire to give them multi-fulfillment center access. In fact, it's an authority that you can set if they have access to multiple fulfillment centers or not. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment, the authorities. But I just wanted to mention that you can select which companies, and in a 3PL, a company is going to be like one of your clients. JASCI also has the capability to do multi-client within one company. However, it is a pretty popular choice with our 3PLs if they intend to separate either processes or team members by client. You're going to select the companies that you want to give them the ability to log into and perform work. So let's go ahead and go to our authority screen as I was talking about. So if we go into authority, same concept, you can search for the specific team member or display all. And I'll just go to me as an example here. If we go to the authorities that I have set, you'll see I've got a whole bunch of them here, like analytics, the ability to change status, the ability to uh, cycle count by a certain variance. So you can actually set different levels like one, two, or three. And each one of those levels will correspond to how much you can actually adjust within a cycle count. So JASCI has cycle count controls where you can declare a variance, but if you wanted to get even more granular, for example, newer employees, you want to give them a tighter window on the variance, you can set that up with the cycle count authority. Multi-fulfillment center, like I mentioned before, the ability to change inventory from certain full screens, order management, the ability to create and edit sales orders, reassign, which is one of my favorite capabilities. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in the webinar. JASCI has the ability to reassign work that's systematically assigned to someone, which is really important to be able to do in the event that that person gets sick or goes home or gets let go, whatever it may be, and they systematically have work tied to their user. You can then reassign that work to a different user that you know is going to be on shift. And that way you don't have work falling between the cracks because systematically it was assigned to Joe, but Joe went home, so therefore nobody picked it or performed it. And we have a few other authorities as well. To add the authorities, you simply hit the new button, and you've got different authority IDs that you can select. For example, API key, if you're going to be the user that has access to the API key. And then you can set the authority level. Most of these, you just put one. However, certain authorities like cycle count have different levels to them based on a value that they'd be allowed to cycle count, for example. Um, so that's the authorities. So as I mentioned at the start of this webinar, we have those three, the team member maintenance to create and edit users, the security authorizations to create and edit login information for the users. The authority is going to be particular things that they can or cannot do within JASCI. And that's separate from what they have access to. This may be authorities may be referring to, like I just mentioned, the access to multi-fulfillment center, the ability to reassign certain metrics on their cycle counting. So stuff that might be happening within the workflows or the different screens that we have, what you can or can't do. Um, and we'd also cover that in some of our screens like workbench maintenance. You can set up certain behaviors for a pack station, for example, that what you do or don't want to allow users to be able to access. but a lot of that is going to be driven from your menu profile assignment as well. Your menu profile assignment is going to be how you control who has access to what screens in JASCI. So if we come in here and we click this menu profile assignment, we can go to my team member again, just as an example and hit edit. This is going to show us, we have the option to say, okay, we want to focus on, all menu profiles, or maybe just mobiles I want to look at. And I want to make sure I'm assigning particular mobile profiles. So we actually have a huge difference between mobile and full screen. Full screen is what we see up here. You can see my menu profile assignment for full screen. I've got everything 1 through 9 for this inbound, inventory, outbound, etc. And then I've also got a profile for our new AI assistant. And then I also have a profile for robotics execution, which is JASCI's ability to connect to and guide various robotic systems in right within this same platform. So this would be my full screen menu profile assignment. As you can see here in my menu profiles assigned, I have, all of those assigned here. And what it's going to show is the description. That's what you're going to see up here. So don't focus too much on the actual profile ID. It's the description is what ends up showing for the user. So you can see I've got the inbound, inventory, outbound. I have a few mobile ones here, like put wall and inventory. So if I was to log in through a mobile device, which I'll show you an example of here. By the way, I simulate mobile devices with Chrome. I typically, for my demos and webinars, things like that, what I'll do is I'll go to like incognito and I'll open up a new window there and then I'll log in um, into my account with a mobile device. And this is going to show the mobile menu profile assignment. So as you can see here, I have inbound, inventory, outbound, put wall, and yard. However, I don't have all these other ones that we see on oops, on the full screen login. So the reason that we do that is because you use different types of access on the full screen than you do on the mobile device. You're not going to be using like reporting and everything that we do on the full screen that requires a lot of real estate, like the pack screens and the viewpoint load. That's all dedicated for full screen. However, the mobile flows are what you typically do on a mobile device. So maybe you want to give yourself a simpler profile for when you're signing in with a mobile for just those flows as opposed to kind of everything that you want access to on the full screen. So I always like to, describe the difference between that and make sure that our customers understand that you want to assign both. If someone's going to be accessing JASCI from both devices, you want to give them a profile assignment for your full screens, and you want to give them a profile assignment for your mobiles. And to move stuff over, you simply just click one and you hit the arrow, and that's going to assign it to that user. And then they basically just need to log out and then log back in, and they're going to have that new profile. Very simple to maintain. You have basically on the left, you have your available, and on the right, you have menu profiles assigned. Um, so that those four things, the menu profile assignment, and I'm not going to talk too much today about menu profile maintenance, which is basically declaring which options are in the profile. You have the ability to do that if you want to further tailor it. And you can also create new profiles that you'd like to use in the menu profile assignment in case you kind of want to craft your own out of JASCI's available menu options. And then we have what's called menu option maintenance, which is rarely used by our customers. This would be in the event that you want to change the name of a menu option to better match your operational terms, or if you wanted to change like the what we call the submenu, which is what it's categorized under within the profile. You have your profile, you have your submenu, and then you have your menu options. If you want to change that submenu, you have the ability to in menu option maintenance. So those are these three, the authority, the team member maintenance, the login, as well as the menu profile assignment are kind of the core four setups for a new user. Now I did mention I wanted to talk about our new AI assistant tool, which is making this a little bit simpler of a process for creating large amounts of users. So if you come and just creating users faster, if you go in here and you choose to look at different setup screens, we have created some assistant tools for team member setup, your cart setup, LPNs, etc. So if we come in here into the team member and then we hit new, what this is going to do is actually give us way less fields that we have to fill in about a team member when we create them. The system just kind of defaults information for the rest that isn't as relevant, like address, for example. Most of our customers, they don't need the addresses of their pickers in the system, right? So this is where you can simply enter the first, last name, work phone, the work email address, and then also the if you want to put like shift code and departments, we have the ability to you can create your departments that you want and your shift codes that you want. This is mostly for organization. We're not doing anything in particular with, programming or anything with those. It's more about organizing and sorting your team members and having that visibility to who fall classifies under a certain department or shift code. We can also create portal users. So if it's going to be like a client or company portal user for a 3PL, or maybe it's a carrier, and you want them to have access to the dock appointments to schedule inbound appointments or outbound appointments. Or maybe you want to give them reporting tool access. So you can create them as a portal user, which JASCI has a different way that we don't charge the same for a portal user as we do for a standard user. And then you can, again, as same as before, you can select the authorized companies for them. But if we scroll down to the bottom, we also see that we have the authority levels and the menu profile assignment. So we have shortcuts to accomplish those all from one screen. So instead of having to jump, multiple menu options, you'll kind of have all of it in one path here for a user. So we've really trimmed down the time that it takes to create new users. And then their login information is what you're gonna place in there in the work email, and then you can generate them with like a standard password, so you could distribute that same password to everybody. So that's part of our new AI assistant tool. Um, we have all sorts of things, and we'll get into these in some of our other webinars that we have, like the workbench settings, different things you can do to the workflows, like settings about, what the picker experience is or what they are allowed to do or not do during receiving, creating different picking carts, setting up your LPN labels, all sorts of stuff like that. That's all part of our new AI assistant for setup. Um, Now, a last thing I wanted to mention on the team member side is if we I'll go into gravity for this example. I mentioned that we have, the reassign work feature, which is something I wanted to make sure that we show. And if you're not familiar with gravity, I believe we've done some webinars, including gravity on order management and things like that. Since JASCI is a system-directed environment, it is very important to have visibility tools into all the work that's out there and is being system directed. And not every day is the same. So gravity gives you the ability to reprioritize that system directed work on the fly, based on what you're observing about the work that's out there. So typically you're going to use that for, outbound stuff, different picks that you want being performed first, or restocks that you need completed next. JASCI does its best to, based on a rule set or work that's out there, it's going to understand how we need to prioritize, all of the different picks and works. However, JASCI might not know something that maybe a certain carrier is not picking up. So you want to reprioritize a different set of picks. Gravity can be used for all of that. You can also estimate how much labor that you have ahead of you in across all the different profiles, which is a big piece as well. So as you can see here in this gravity, in my picking profiles, I have all kinds of kit picks, pallet picks, etc., labor estimations, and slider bars where I can reprioritize. What I always recommend to our customers as they're building their gravity profiles is to, uh, one, tailor it to how you operate and how you view picks and work that's out there. Allows you to really create your own reports and real-time profiles of data that show you exactly what you need to focus in on. But I also always recommend creating an assigned profile, which means that you have, or profiles, so you have different profiles that are going to show you types of work that are in an assigned status. So here you can see I have 15 assigned pallet picks in a demo environment where I barely, operate. So it looks like I've really just had a whole bunch of stuff assigned to people for the longest amount of time. You can see how long some of these have been aging, thousands of hours, right? Because I've had this environment for years. So if I wanted to, look at, one of these pallet picks and I say, okay, we need to make sure that this gets switch to somebody else because Dan's not here anymore. What we can do is with that authority for reassign, we can go into that work detail, whether we get to it through gravity or just by doing a search on the sales order or the work control number. You have multiple ways that you can get to a work detail, but we can see that we have some buttons here like reassign, unassign, change status. These are all tied to authorities that we have. So my user being someone who can reassign or unassign, I have these buttons available and they're not grayed out. Um, so if I said, okay, Dan's not here, let's reassign this to somebody that is. The moment we reassign this to a person, whoever signs into, when they sign into zone 100, they're going to get this exact pick to perform. So when we go to click reassign, we can then simply choose the team member that we'd like to reassign it to. So I'm going to reassign this to Pam. By the way, if nobody's familiar with Pam, she's part of our implementation and production support team. So highly recommend working with Pam, and we'll give her a little bit more work here by reassigning a pallet pick to her. So just like that, we've reassigned that systematically and avoided a major issue of work falling between the cracks because a team member that was systematically assigned to it went home or left, etc. Um, so I always recommend people to keep a gravity profile where you can, monitor work that's actively assigned. And if you see anything that's like over an hour or, at the end of a shift, end of the day, and you still have stuff that's in an assigned state, you want to be able to address it. So you'd like to come to this at the end of a shift and see nothing showing up. However, I see I have 15 things, so I've got some work to do with reassigning. The last thing that I want to close on with, monitoring team members, we talked about the creation and editing of them. And I showed here, some of the what the authorities can do with team members, like reassigning particular team members to other work, or assigning work to them. Uh, Last thing we'll talk about is being able to monitor labor and performance. So we have different labor lookups and labor reports where you can view by team member. You can also get to the team member scores through this general one, which is just labor lookup. And I can say, you can put any kind of date and time range in here. The time range would be if, you're looking at work that happened in a particular shift. Um, I'll just say, let's search, all of my labor over the year, regardless of what task it was. And now we can see we've got all these different tasks in the zones that they occurred in. I could see my cluster picking in zone 100, 200, and 300. I could see my cycle count performance in these four zones. I can see my packing performance, my picking performance, my pallet picks, right? So if we clicked on one of these and hit detail, this is then going to show us all the team members. So this is kind of like a shortcut to show us which team members worked in that zone, performing that task in that date range that we're looking at. So we can see, JASCI demo did the bulk of the work there. They did, no one else even had an hour worth of work. But JASCI demo did 10, so that volume is something to consider. But let's say we were analyzing how each person performed on these picks. You can see, I did 45 picks. And I did all of that in less than an hour, right? So my labor standard is through the roof. And you can also, let's say you're not sure if it's just amount of picks, but maybe you've got varying types of picks. Like you might have one where it's just, picked two different products to a pallet and filled the pallet. Or maybe you have one that's like 20 lines because it's like a case here and there of all different SKUs, and you're picking all of those to a pallet. Maybe you want to go by lines per hour at that point instead of work per hour, because the lines per hour would give you a much better metric. Or maybe it's, e-commerce picking and you're really concerned about how many products they physically grabbed off the shelf, as opposed to how many locations they visit or how many total, cluster picks they performed. So we're going to give you all of the different per hour metrics as well as the volume metrics too. If you'd like to track errors, you have the ability to track how many times they made improper scans. Most of our customers don't do that because, sometimes you just miss, right? When you were trying to scan the barcode and you hit something else. But you do have the ability to. Now, let's say we wanted to investigate myself a little bit further. We could see that I have a phenomenal performance at this palette pick task. However, I didn't do too much of it, right? So we could say, well, what else has Joe done in this time period? And when we click detail, this is going to be a shortcut into a labor lookup by team member. So this is going to show just particularly that team member in the date range that you had initially looked. And this is going to show us also our weighted standards. So if you have team members that do different workflows, maybe you have someone that helps out with cycle counting or putaways, once there's not as many picks or vice versa. This is what this is going to do is it's going to consider all of the time spent across all of the different tasks and then give a weighted score based on the standard. So that way, if I, did mostly putaways, but the one time they called me in to do a pallet pick, it was awful. It's not really going to crush my score that I had that awful, one pallet pick when most of my putaway work has been really fast. And you could see based on this score, the 117.48, I'm performing above the standard. 100 on the nose would be exactly to the standard, and anything below that would be below the standard. So once it drops below like a 70 percent of the standard, I think we give, or 75, we give it like a yellow highlight, which I call the mark of almost shame. And then if it gets worse, it goes orange and then red, which I call the mark of shame. But it's kind of just a visual cue that we give supervisors and admins on, if they're monitoring the labor to quickly see, hey, this person's not performing well in their weighted standard. And then you can kind of know what you're looking for here in the data. Now, if we look at the data, you can also see that not only is it tracking things I do like PO receiving and put away and picks and stuff, but it's also tracking the sign on and sign offs. And by the way, all tasks that are tracked in here, it will be down to the second that it was performed, so you get very granular data. And then we will also show you if it occurred in a particular zone. For example, the put away was in zone 100. The PO receiving was not in the zone because it was just, receiving at the receiving dock. And we can see, our individual metrics on each task that was performed. In fact, we give you the identifier for that task in case you needed to look that up and, look a little bit more into it with our what we call our work detail page. Um, and then we'll also give you the status. Maybe it's, it's still in an assigned or working state. You'd be able to see that here in the status column. So this is basically a lookup that shows you all kinds of work that a particular user has performed in a time period, which is massively helpful if you're monitoring new employees or you saw someone that didn't have a good score against the standard, or maybe they had a great score against the standard and you're observing what else they do because maybe it's time to, move them into a better position and you need to figure out, what you'd be sacrificing, with their picking scores, etc., so you can bring the proper new labor in to replace it. So you get a lot of information out of JASCI's labor data. We're tracking everything. And then we do, if I go back just two screens where we had multiple team members on there, you can also see not only do you get the comparison, but you also get the group averages. So you can start to analyze your different shifts and how they compare against one another, as opposed to individual team members comparing against each other. So that wraps up what I wanted to talk about today, which is, user and team member management. We talked about the creation of them. We talked about some of the authorities like reassigning work. And then we also just talked about, monitoring labor and performance of the users in JASCI. So we really thank everybody for joining or watching this if you didn't join live. And if you have any questions about what I talked about today, or really any other topics that you've seen in one of our webinars, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Either email James or myself, or you can fill out a form on our website. If you're an active customer of JASCI, you could submit a ticket with a question about one of our webinars. So we look forward to seeing everyone next week for our whatever our next webinar is going to be. And James, I'll pass it to you to wrap things up here.
Yep, there's no questions in the chat as of right now, so thanks everyone for joining in and yeah, have a good weekend.
Thank you. Take care.